What if the most powerful voice in early Islam belonged to a man with no power at all? This was Bilal ibn Rabah. Tribe to protect him, no wealth, no family name that meant anything in Makkah, just a body pinned under a rock in the worst heat of the day, and two words he refused to stop saying. Ahead, ahead, one. That man was an enslaved African, born of Abyssinian roots, on the streets of Makkah. His name was Bilal ibn Rabah. And this is how a man with nothing became one of the most honored voices in Islamic history. Before the persecution, before the fame, before his voice became the sound of a new religion, Bilal was simply property. He was an enslaved man in Makkah, tied to the Banu Juma tribe of Abyssinian Ethiopian origin. His mother was Hamama. His master was a man named Umayyah ibn Khalaf. In Makkah's world, status decided everything. Your tribe protected you. Your wealth shielded you. Your bloodline decided how much your life was worth in the eyes of others. Bilal had none of that. But then a message reached him, not from a king, not from a general, from a man named Muhammad. The message was simple and it was dangerous. One God, one Creator. No idols standing between you and Him. And Bilal believed it. He became one of the earliest people in history to accept Islam. For a man with power, that decision might cost a reputation. For an enslaved man in Makkah, it could cost his life. Umayyah ibn Khalaf found out. And what followed was not a warning. It was an attempt to break a man completely. Bilal was dragged into the open heat of the Meccan sun, restrained, tortured, given one way out. Renounce Islam. Say the words. End the pain. He refused. Over and over, under the weight of that punishment, witnesses recorded him repeating the same two words. Ahead, ahead, one. Allah is one. Think about what that means. Every tool his tormentors had, the heat, the stone, the pain, was a tool built to reach his mind and force it to lie. It never worked. His body was theirs to restrain. His belief was not. And while Bilal endured this, one man in Makkah was quietly working to end it. Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr purchased Bilal's freedom. Years later, Umar ibn al-Khattab would describe that moment with a single striking sentence. Abu Bakr is our chief, and he freed our chief. He was talking about Bilal. Now here is what makes this story different from a simple rescue. Bilal didn't spend his new freedom chasing the comfort he'd been denied his whole life. He turned to Abu Bakr and said something remarkable. If you have bought me for yourself, then keep me. But if you have bought me for Allah's sake, then leave me for Allah's work. A free man choosing service over comfort. That choice would carry him far beyond Makkah. The Muslims migrated to Medina. A new community was forming, and it needed something it had never needed before. A way to call everyone to prayer, together, at once. The messenger of Allah turned to Bilal and gave him the words that would define the rest of his life. Oh Bilal, get up and call the people to prayer. Picture that moment. The same voice that had once been forced under torture to be silent was now the voice summoning an entire community to stand before God. Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. That sound became the daily rhythm of Medina, and it became inseparable from Bilal. He wasn't just present at the birth of this community. He was its sound. Years passed. The young community in Medina grew, and then came a day no one in Makkah could have predicted. The city that had once tortured Bilal in its streets opened its gates to him again. Except this time he walked in beside the messenger of Allah. When the Prophet entered the Kaaba, Bilal entered with him, alongside Usama ibn Zayd and Uthman ibn Talha. Later, Ibn Umar asked Bilal a simple question. Where exactly had the Prophet prayed inside? Bilal didn't hesitate. He pointed to the exact place between the two front pillars. He remembered every detail because he had been there. Sit with that for a moment. The enslaved man once dragged through Makkah's streets in chains was now standing inside its most sacred structure, beside its most honored man. The city that once witnessed his suffering now witnessed his honor. But the most extraordinary moment of Bilal's story wasn't a battle. It wasn't a conquest. It was a quiet question asked one morning at Fajr. The Prophet turned to Bilal and said, "Tell me the best deed you did after embracing Islam, for I heard the sound of your footsteps ahead of me in paradise." Bilal thought about it, and his answer wasn't about the torture he'd survived. It wasn't about standing beside the Prophet. It wasn't about his status now. He said simply, whenever he purified himself, day or night, he prayed, as much as had been written for him. That's it. No armies, no conquest, no dramatic declaration, just consistency, small, private, repeated devotion. And the Prophet heard his footsteps in paradise before he ever arrived there. Every story built around a great companion eventually reaches this moment. The messenger of Allah died. The man Bilal had followed from Makkah's torture pits to the gates of Medina. The man he had served, protected and called believers to pray beside, was gone. Something in Bilal changed after that. The adhan that once summoned the Prophet himself to prayer now carried a different weight in his throat. Bilal eventually left Medina and settled in the region of Sham. The historical record about his later years is thin. He had lived through Makkah's cruelty. He had witnessed Medina's birth. He died in Sham. Bilal believed when believing could get him killed. He stayed firm when giving up would have ended his suffering instantly. He worshipped after freedom, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And he kept praying quietly until the very end of his life. The people of Makkah once looked at Bilal and saw only an enslaved man. The messenger of Allah looked at him and saw a believer, and in the end it was Bilal's footsteps, not his chains, not his status, that were heard in paradise before he ever set foot there. The man who once cried out under torture, Ahad, Ahad, one, became one of the most enduring symbols of faith, patience, and devotion in Islamic history. This was Bilal ibn Rabah.